Talking with Tasha, talking with Tasha. This is Talking with Tasha, episode 55. Whoop, whoop. All right. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Talking with Tasha. I hope you enjoyed the first new episode of 2025, the Lost Cast with Trey. I hope you're enjoying that. Like I said, that will kind of be every other episode, along with very important interviews like the one today. But before I get to that, let's talk a little bit about what I've been watching. Let's talk about movies real quick. Oscar nominations just came out today, and let's see here. Obviously, Wicked is a big deal, but you know what I'm a little surprised by? Emilia Perez tops Oscar nominations with 13, and I watched Emilia Perez. It's on Netflix, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie, and it does have some poignant moments in it. And for those of you that don't know, it is about a Mexican cartel leader who has a wife and kids, and then he enlists the help of Zoe Saldana's character, who is a lawyer, to help him transition to be a woman because his whole life feels like it's been a lie, and she does it partially because he says she'll pay him well, but she has to help him. But the whole reason there needs to be a lawyer involved is to get out of the cartel life. He's trying to fake his own death and be totally cut off, but make sure his wife and kids are provided for and all these sorts of things. Selena Gomez plays the wife, and then there's the two kids, and it kind of goes from there. And don't get me wrong, it's still an interesting movie, and no offense to Emilia Perez, but the songs in Wicked are way better. I mean, I'm just kind of surprised it's getting this many award nominations. Good. It's kind of the little movie that could, even though it has some star power and stuff. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that. I do think dealing with trans issues is very important, and we need more characters like that. I get that, but I don't know. Maybe I'll cut this all out because I don't know how to talk about it. What else? Obviously, Wicked got a ton of nominations, but dang it, they didn't nominate the director, John M. Chu, and that's annoying. They did nominate the female director for The Substance, though, and I am blanking on her name. Coralie Fargiat, I think is how you say her name. So she was nominated, and usually the best director is a boys club. So we'll see what happens there. And I'm kind of The Brutalist. I haven't watched yet, but it's like a 3.5 hour movie. Why didn't they make that a mini series or something? I don't know. I'll probably still watch it at some point, but I haven't gotten to it yet. What I did watch also got nominated for a couple of things. A Real Pain. Jesse Eisenberg wrote and directed it. He's also in it, playing a cousin to Kieran Culkin. And they are cousins that are going on a Holocaust tour in Poland after their grandma dies, because that's where she's from. And they want to go see the town she grew up in and her house. And then they go do a tour of one of the camps, and there's some very poignant moments in this movie, and Kieran Culkin was nominated, and he did deserve it. His character, that was a pretty good movie. I'd say part of you wants to not like him, but then the other part of you is like, I don't know. It's just interesting because he's very outspoken, or at least the character is very outspoken and just kind of different. And I think the title being A Real Pain it's like layers, because their grandma died and he is in pain, and obviously they're talking about the Holocaust, and Jennifer Grey's also in it. So that was interesting to see. That's on Hulu if you want to check that out. I also, not nominated for Oscars, and actually came out in 2018, didn't realize it. I watched Hereditary the other day. Toni Collette's in it. Well, in the beginning of the movie, her character's mom dies, and she's having a hard time grieving that. And then in the movie, as the movie goes on, her daughter dies in a very terrible accident, and she starts going to a grief counseling group, and a lady she meets there talks her into doing a seance, but then all hell breaks loose, literally. I don't know what's going on. Apparently her mom was in some thing. It's kind of witch vibes, like covens and stuff, or Wiccans, but not really. It was interesting. I don't know if I fully liked how it ended, but there were a few times I did get a jump scare, and it really did hold my attention, and it was very suspense filled. So there's that. But parts of it are kind of graphic. So trigger warning there. And that is, where did I watch that? Netflix, I think. I can't remember. It's somewhere. TV real quick. I started watching The Pit on Max. It is a medical drama starring Noah Wyle, but he will always be Dr. Carter for me from ER. Obviously, nothing's going to be ER because I just love that show so much, but it's a Pittsburgh emergency room. He's the go-to guy, and it's kind of interesting to see him training the new people because when ER started, he was the med student, I don't dislike it, and it's an interesting premise. It's kind of like 24 in that each episode is 1 hour of a shift. So the very first episode is 7 to 8 o'clock a.m. The second episode is 8 to 9 o'clock. The third episode is 9 to 10 o'clock. And some of these people in the ER, you see how their family members or the diagnosis progressing, and it's an interesting way to do a medical show. I posted about watching The Pit, and then someone on my Instagram said, "Oh, you're watching the new Dr. Carter show. You should check out a new show Dr. Benton is on, aka in real life Eric LaSalle. He is on a show called On Call, which is on Amazon. It is a cop procedural type show, and I did like it. I watched it all in one evening. The episodes are a little shorter, like 30, 35 minutes. Benton doesn't play a Superman character. He's kind of a side character, I'd say. And also, Aunt Becky from Full House is on it. Good to see her getting some work after the college admission scandal. But the premise of the show is this she's a female officer, and she's one of the trainers for the newcomers from the academy. And it's her and her new trainee and just how they get to know each other and how she's teaching him things and he's teaching her things. Everyone's learning is what I'm saying. And yeah, I really liked it. And it is a Dick Wolf show, so that totally makes sense because I love Law & Order SVU. So there you go. And The Pit allegedly was supposed to be an ER reboot or sequel or something, but then Michael Crichton's family, who did the first one, or was the creator of ER, said no or put the kibosh on it. I don't know. Somehow the show still got made. But if it was supposed to be an ER reboot, I don't see it because it's not in Chicago. I don't know. It just does not have the same vibe to me at all. But of course, I'm going to watch it. I love me some Noah Wyle. That's that on that. Ooh, also, I just finished reading this book called The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich, and it was really good. It's definitely a thinker. It is about everybody when they turn 22 gets this box with a string in it, and the string is the length of your life. And then there are calculations you can do to figure out how old you'll be when you die. And it's, do you want to open your box or not? Can the government make you open it or not? Can you be discriminated against just because you have a short string? There's all these things to think about. I don't know. It just really made you think. And it was also this isn't really a spoiler, but it's also one of those stories where a lot of the characters at some point cross paths and they're all strung together. And I like those kind of stories. Check that out if you want a book to really make you think. Okay, let's get to today's meat and potatoes. In today's episode, I'm talking with Becky Rasmussen from Call to Freedom. Call to Freedom is an organization here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It is a trauma-informed nonprofit that provides comprehensive, ongoing, and coordinated support services for all individuals impacted by human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. That is according to their website, calltofreedom.org. So today's conversation is with Becky Rasmussen, the founder. And I will say beforehand, we did have a few technical difficulties in the beginning. So just keep that in mind as the conversation goes on. And Becky is very impressive to me for many reasons, but she speaks so eloquently and so intelligently and so compassionately about this very heavy subject. But she really just, the work she does is needed, but I don't know how she does it. It must be so hard to deal with. And it's one of those jobs too where I bet she kind of wishes she was out of work because, it'd be nice if this wasn't happening all around us. And in the conversation, she mentions that this is what human trafficking looks like in South Dakota, but just keep in mind that these same situations are happening all over, and be sure to reach out for help if you or someone you know needs it. And January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, which is why I wanted to help Becky shine light on Call to Freedom and what they do. But keep in mind that this is something that needs attention all the time, not just in January. So get educated, get informed, and hopefully this conversation will help do some of that for you. Also, there's a part in this where I say the word symbolization. I meant symbolism, but I just thought I'd get that out of the way here first before I get messages saying, "What'd you say?" I know I said that weird. Here is my chat with Becky Rasmussen from Call to Freedom. You are the founder of Call to Freedom here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. How long has Call to Freedom been around?
Yeah, established Call to Freedom in 2016. We started with just volunteers and a 10-hour week case manager. And we opened our doors and really began to see individuals walk through as we grew into now, obviously, 2025. We have 28 positions, and we have a home that supports women and their children. Up to 36 can live with us, as well as we have 2 offices, but we will be combining those offices and moving here before the middle of 2025. So we've grown very, very quickly. Over 1,400 people have walked through the doors to receive services through Call to Freedom.
And I should say the reason I wanted you on the podcast in January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and you have a lot of events and things this month. And I think human trafficking is one of those things that I think a lot of people see the movie Taken and they think it's, some scary guy is going to like kidnap you or something. But, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times it's people we know or family, or you kind of get groomed into it by people in your life. Is that kind of true?
Yeah, there are many different ways that the illegal activity of human trafficking, either sex or labor trafficking, is facilitated. There are times where people can kidnap and bring people into those scenarios. But typically, what we've seen here in South Dakota and many other states is what we call that grooming and recruiting, or manipulation into getting an individual to leave or come to you. And then through coercion, they will typically, or force, fraud, or coercion, have that individual pulled into either sex or labor trafficking. We've had great Christian families where the young girl met somebody online, made a connection. They had a false profile, a false identity, told them everything they wanted to hear, found out their vulnerability, and drew them into themselves in another state to facilitate this. So typically what we see is just individuals that are looking for vulnerabilities, and they can find that through social media. They can find that through relationships. They can find that through parents to get to the kids. Familial trafficking is one that's very common in the state of South Dakota because we have 5 of the poorest counties in the United States located here in South Dakota with our reservations. Also, typically what we see with 29 and 90 is what we call transit trafficking, where they're moving individuals from one event or one location to another. So they're coming through our rural communities. They actually love rural communities because typically we are pretty naive to this happening or being facilitated within our communities. And so they go into our medical communities, they stop for a while in rural communities, or they might actually be in those rural communities, just looking for those vulnerable individuals. So it can happen in many different ways. What I tell the community, it's really important to get educated, understand we have multiple events through our informational luncheon. We also have an event here coming up on February 4th, which will be a Tuesday night at the State Theater. And that event will be a movie called Trapped. And I really liked that movie simply for the fact that it was filmed in North Dakota, and Ejaz Cohen, who is the producer of that movie, had his own encounter with a trafficking victim, learned about it, and just said, I have to do something about this. And so he ended up interviewing 121 individuals. Most of those were those with lived experience, which we call survivors, to really find out how this is facilitated. And he filmed it in North Dakota because what he found through his research is a lot of people were getting groomed and recruited and through vulnerable situations. And so this movie is really centered around a rural community in North Dakota, a mom who was very vulnerable, had an addiction. A young girl was identified through a perpetrator, and he got to the young girl through the mother. And so
Mm.
it's really a kind of a it really gives a true picture of what it looks like within rural communities and how vulnerable individuals can be fall prey to this as well as their children.
What made you what called you to do this work? What made you decide I need to start this organization? I guess I don't really know how that how that came about.
Yeah. So I was in prayer. I'm a faith person. I knew at some point in time that I would be involved with this anti human trafficking world and didn't know how or what that looked like. I was in prayer in May of 2015. I really felt prompted by the Lord to get involved with anti human trafficking. Didn't know what that looked like. So I Googled anti human trafficking in South Dakota, ended up at a luncheon at a small nonprofit called Tapestry International that was doing some of this work and essentially got on their board, started volunteering. It was August of 2015 where we went on an outreach in Sturgis, South Dakota. It was the 75th anniversary Sturgis Rally. It was over 450,000 people that have come to the Sturgis Rally that year. Every year varies, but that's a large amount of people in a short amount of time coming in. And so our outreach in August of 2015 was to individuals who could be purchasing other individuals. And a lot of times when people purchase other individuals, they think it's prostitution or they make that choice. And we want to do education that it's not always a choice. Sometimes individuals are forced into that activity by others. And so we were passing out information, really just talking to the community. And I made contact with a young girl and eye contact, and I just felt really drawn to her. And so I took a bold step and I just walked up and introduced myself. And I said, "Hi, I'm Becky." And she said, "Hi, my name is Marissa." And we had about less than a 10-minute conversation. Her last words to me were, "You have no idea what kind of day I've had. You have no idea." And then she was gone. Looked like she could be in the life, looked like she was pretty vulnerable, didn't disclose to me in that conversation what was really happening to her. The next day, we attended a self defense class and actually got connected with an organization called Free International that did search and rescue. And essentially, what they would do is they would go into large events. So they've been to PGA, Super Bowl, and then obviously they were here in Sturgis Rally for the first time. And they had accumulated a book of 116 girls age 6 to under 18. And these girls were identified as missing from a 4 to 5 state radius. So every time they go into an event, they will do a missing report of kids in the surrounding areas with the hope of finding these missing kids. Essentially, what they found through that work is a lot of those missing kids were pulled into human trafficking situations. So some could be commercially being exploited, others could be survival, but for many, that was human trafficking. And as he's talking, he hands me a book, and I just felt led to kind of search through the book and wondered if the girl that I met the day before was in this book. And long story short, I turned the page and there was her picture. Her name was Marissa. So this was August of 2015. She had been found at October of 2014, went missing again May of 2015. And here we were doing this search in August. And I just started asking the questions, this girl is here. How could somebody be found and go missing again? How does this work? And they began to tell me that there were only 298 beds in the United States for victims of human trafficking to safely leave situations. And that thousands of kids and adults were being pulled into human trafficking situations, but resources and options and safety and living and those basic needs just weren't being provided at that time. And I knew I could do something with that, or I could just sit on it. And I just felt called with the gal that I was working with through Tapestry International, just felt like she wanted to transition the work. And she suggested she would transition it to me. And I prayed and I felt like I was called to do this. And so we filed for a 501c3 in November of 2015, received it January of 2016, opened our first office March of 2016.
Wow.
Didn't know what to expect, didn't know if actual victims or those with lived experience would be walking through our doors. And it hasn't stopped from that day. We started simply as volunteers. There isn't a lot of money in nonprofits. So I essentially worked two jobs up until November of 2017, where I received my first paycheck from Call to Freedom. And now, fast forward to today, we're at 28 positions, two locations, a home that we fundraised and built and opened the doors of that place in April 1st, so Marissa's house. So it's called Marissa's house from my encounter with the young girl in Sturgis, South Dakota. And essentially, we've just had women and children walking through the doors of Call to Freedom ever since. Sorry, my washer just went off.
You're fine. That's okay.
I was like, of course it did. Yeah, of course.
No, you're totally fine.
So I can start at the end and you can edit that out. But
No, I
and so
kinda I like the, keeping it real.
okay, sounds good. I appreciate that. Sorry about that.
In that story, you mentioned that that book had kids in it from 6 to 18, and I hear 6 and my heart just, like, drops, And I attended the Red Sand Project event that you
Yeah.
did last when was that? It was still kinda
July.
summer. It was like
July
July,
of
yeah. Um,
2024. We usually do that around the Sturgis rally and right before
yeah.
hunting season.
And I remember even at that event, one of the speakers mentioned that, people always kind of assume that women or girls are the main people that end up being trafficked, but a lot of times boys are as well, and sometimes the boys are even younger. Is uh, I don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around some of these facts because it just does seem so sad, but it really is kind of everybody's vulnerable to this, right? It's not really a certain age or gender or anything.
So, how the cycle of human trafficking works for sex trafficking, essentially, if you have somebody who we call the demand, which is a buyer, whatever they're looking for, it could be a young girl, it could be a young boy. It just depends on their preference. The job of the trafficker, which is a business facilitator, he goes out and recruits whatever he can sell to this demand. And we have seen an escalation of not only young girls but boys, and we do not do any favors by not talking about that. I think one of the hardest avenues to get self disclosures or for young boys to feel comfortable or not ashamed to come out is to break the barriers and talk about it. What we find it is harder to identify in young boys because of some of the stigma that's attached around young boys. Just, hey, suck it up, that a boy.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of shame and guilt that surround men and young boys and through this victimization. But the reality is that the trafficker is going to find and recruit whatever he can make money off of. There's no value to this human being. This is a business to these individuals. And what we've seen, especially on the sextortion side, is this increase to young boys. And essentially, they're asking for nude pictures and they're blackmailing these young boys at an increasingly large rate because they're not expecting it. And they're facilitating some of these sextortion. Could be financial sextortion, it could be traditional sextortion, asking them for pictures, thinking that they're a model like person behind the camera that's asking for these and creating a false identity. And these young boys are sending these pictures. You can never get those pictures back. You can never get those videos back. They can be sold on the black web. They can be utilized in many different ways. Obviously, with AI today, it's pretty scary to put anything out online
Mhm.
because they can manipulate it. And what we've seen is such an increase on Department of Homeland Security is just kind of at their wits' end with some of the sextortion piece, simply for the fact that it's increasing. And then young boys don't have services, so they don't feel comfortable talking. There's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And we're seeing a lot of young boys' suicides following this
Mhm.
particular criminal activity. And so that's why we brought in Jordan this last time, because I wanted to break the silence over any demographic that's affected by human trafficking, that it's not siloed to young girls or women. Men and young boys are impacted by this. Our LGBTQ population is affected by this. Our indigenous population are affected by this. wherever there's vulnerabilities, traffic will find. Wherever the demand wants that particular, if it's a blue-eyed, blonde-haired young girl or a dark-haired, brown-eyed young boy, that's what the trafficker is going to get. And so I think, again, the key to every individual who's listening to this podcast, just get educated, understand that not everybody online or not everybody you meet has the best intentions for you. And so really understanding how this is facilitated, how they recruit, how they build a relationship with you is really key to protecting yourself.
I guess I mentioned the Red Sand Project. Do you want to tell everybody what that exactly was? Because I thought it was pretty powerful. I even have some of my sand still right here, but
Awesome.
like
Yay.
the symbolization of it was really, really cool. But
Yeah. Well, we wanted to talk about our marginalized populations, as we just talked about young boys, marginalized populations in our Indigenous community. Here in the state of South Dakota, we have 5 of the poorest counties in the United States here in South Dakota with our reservations. And we really wanted to use the Red Sand Project as a way to symbolize all those people who fall through the cracks. You hear about missing and murdered Indigenous. You hear about young boys that never get identified, many kids that go on the missing list. Those marginalized populations don't have all the resources and support that some other populations have. And so the Red Sand Project really is to fill in the cracks. And so we invited our community to take a little packet of red sand, and we went outside and we filled in the cracks. And that stood for every one of those granules stood for somebody who went missing, never got identified. But we want to say, we see you, we hear you, we're here to support you, and really bring awareness to those marginalized populations through the Red Sand Project. And that, 50 million people go missing every year. And some of them are pulled into trafficking, some are pulled into other horrific situations. And we really have to make that a priority, even if missing and murdered Indigenous needs more attention to that, because those lives matter. There's somebody's child, there's somebody's granddaughter, there's somebody's niece or nephew. And so we really wanted to invite, and we also had Lynette Grable here sharing on behalf of her Indigenous experience and just what she was seeing within the reservations through her work and the Indigenous populations, and to spread light, especially around Sturgis and hunting season, as people are going through our communities. Some don't always have the best intentions.
it's interesting you brought up Sturgis and the Super Bowl earlier, because I watch a lot of Law and Order SVU, and they have an episode specifically where during the Super Bowl weekend, and they keep saying like, the Super Bowl weekend, it's the biggest weekend because they're trying to do like a sting of a trafficking operation. And it was
Mhm.
interesting, like, to find out that it is around events like that where it's, and I don't want to say all guys are bad, but it does seem like where there are big gatherings of men is where this stuff happens. And so it was crazy to hear that, yeah, it's the hunting season, it's Sturgis, it's the Super Bowl, it's like you even said PGA, like golf.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you don't, it's, yeah,
Mhm.
it's crazy.
When you have large gatherings of people, there are women that buy kids too.
Yeah,
One
true.
of the things is the higher population of most of the convictions do come from males. But this is the buyers to the victims. There's no demographic here. And the large events, what happens is you have a large amount of money, you have a large amount of people, you have an activity. Sometimes feel people who are buying other individuals or facilitating in this horrific crime can want to go away and hide that from their normal daily life. And so when you can go to an event, you're around a bunch of other people that maybe welcome that kind of behavior, there's obviously going to be what we call a demand. And if there's a demand, that's where that business is facilitated. And I always say around Sturgis, there's a lot of great people who are coming. Not everybody are bad actors, right? But when you have that kind of money and that kind of traffic coming in a short amount of time at an event, as you see historically Super Bowl, and we talked about PGA, there is the facilitation. And that's why those sting operations are happening, as they, within that short window, people are intentionally sometimes coming not only to see the Super Bowl or just to come to Sturgis, they're coming for this illegal activity of human trafficking. And I think sometimes there are people who are buying other individuals just think that they're willing victims. They think that this person has made that choice to facilitate. That is true. There are some sex workers who've made the choice. I guess I would never say that somebody at a 3 or 4 year old and you ask them, what do they dream of being when they grow up? I've never heard a young kid say, I want to be a sex worker. So
Yeah.
sometimes life happens. Sometimes vulnerabilities happen. It's later in life. Sometimes people make those choices. My experience has been there's been some kind of victimization in their life. And that's where their identity becomes because that's their self worth. But I'm here to tell you that a majority of those people, if you are buying individuals, the majority of those people are not making the choice to do this on their own. They usually have a pimp or somebody who's behind it facilitating.
Mhm.
And if they are under the age of 18 federally, force, fraud, and coercion does not need to be proven. It is human trafficking. If they're over the age of 18, force, fraud, and coercion has to be proven in sex and labor cases. However, the majority of the time is they'll be holding their children, or there's something behind the scenes that they might look like a willing victim, but rarely is that the case.
You mentioned being educated is one of the best things we can do. So, what are some signs we can look for as everyday people going through our lives? What are things to be on the lookout?
Absolutely. If you, I can spot it in lots of different places. I wasn't able to do that many years ago until I learned about this issue and lived life with those that were impacted. If you're in a situation where you see somebody who's younger with older people, maybe don't have the ability to freely come and go, do not have possession of their identification, maybe don't even know where they're at. They may not be dressed appropriately for the weather. They may not look like they fit in. They may be dressed inappropriately. If they are and they're not able to have a conversation with you, make eye contact with you, that is a potential force situation. And essentially, what we look for if they don't have, if you ask them if they know where they're at, if you ask them if they have access to their personal identifications, they say no. Those are big red flags that there's somebody in a forced situation as well. And then they exhibit malnutrition. They could have poor hygiene, fatigue. There could be some physical abuse, some mental abuse. A lot of traffickers will control their victims and introduce drugs to their victims when they get them into those situations. And so, some people who appear to have maybe mental health or they appear to have an addiction, but they look like they're in a controlled environment, that's a red flag too. And so, all of those indicators really are, and rarely does a trafficking victim yell, I'm a trafficking victim, and ask for help because of that force, fraud, and coercion. So, if you identify something along those lines, what I'd highly recommend is calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline and reporting to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Those are then funneled to our Attorney General's office, and then they follow up on those leads with the federal entities. And if you are a victim of trafficking, if anything I say today and you're like, wow, that's me, I don't know how to get out, I need help. Call to Freedom is here. We can help navigate those situations. You can either email us or you can call us. That direct outreach number is 605-759-3565. Or you can go to our website. If you don't have access to a phone, you can get to an internet. You can text or call on that number, or you can go to our website, which is calltofreedom.org, and send us an email and let us know when we can get in touch with you. And we'll make sure to follow your guidelines and where you're at.
For anybody listening that's like, oh, I'd love to volunteer or help or donate, what are ways that people can get involved and,
Yeah.
try
One
to.
of the first things that I felt and I recognized as I started doing the work of Call to Freedom is so many people have no idea how to make a difference because it's such a scary topic. It's a big topic. And one of the things that we wanted to be at Call to Freedom really intentional about is creating opportunities for people's passions and gifts to be tied into the mission. And so we have a variety of different volunteer opportunities. You can go to calltofreedom.org. Eden, who is our community manager, outreach manager, she will get back to you once you email and send in what you're looking for. Just some different ways to volunteer. We have people who grocery shop for our ladies. Sometimes they're just a little short for the month. They can't afford to buy groceries, but they're making their other bills. We'll make a grocery list of some of the things that are missing. We'll give them to some of those volunteers and they'll go pick up those extra items, and we'll make sure to get those to the survivors that and their families that month. As well as we have ambassadors that go across the state of South Dakota. I'll have to show you one of these pull tabs. You might have seen them in a variety of different stops or rest stops.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a Call to Freedom pull tab. We have 80 ambassadors that take these into rest stops. They take them into visitor bureaus, gas stations across the state, and they go into the bathroom, or they go where maybe victims are have a moment alone. And it never fails that somebody reads some of those questions and these tabs disappear pretty quickly. We go through a lot of those throughout the state of South Dakota. So that is a simply volunteer opportunity to individuals who can become mentors. We go through a little bit more of an intense process to match with survivors. But it's about a 6-month process that they go through some training and vetting. And then we connect them to either be spiritual mentors with volunteer or with our those that we serve, or just mentors within the community. We have other individuals who do just administrative work within our office. We have a moving team that helps move ladies into their
Oh,
new
wow.
places when they transition in, to people who come and greet at our events and maybe help us with some of our special events. So any gift or passion you have within the community and you feel like can help further the mission of Call to Freedom, Eden will sit down with you, learn about that. And if we don't have that opportunity, we are never failed from creating new opportunities for people to get involved. We just want to hear from you and get you connected. And then obviously you can give gift cards. We have a variety of gift packs, these different welcome baskets that we give the ladies when they move into their new home, freedom bags that when they walk through the doors, typically their clothes on their back aren't their own. They don't have any hygiene products. The community's put together what we call freedom bags, and we get those to them right away, and it's our gift from the community. So there's different ways that you can get involved tangibly, and do some drives and do some fundraising events that aren't just monetary. They're very active. That's all listed at calltofreedom.org on our website. And if you also want to just give monetarily as well, we do receive those and to further the mission and to reach more people.
I've seen in certain restaurants or bars and stuff where even in the stall, it'll say like, order this drink if you're afraid or feel uncomfortable. And I think that's kind of interesting because then that's kind of a code, like they don't have to
Yeah.
actually, I don't know. I just love when I see those because I like that establishment is trying to help, so
That
I
they're
like that.
actively concerned about people that are being victimized, if it's domestic violence, sexual assault, to human trafficking. We can all play a part. And I think one of the biggest things I would say in those avenues is make sure your staff is fully trained and understands that response. It's really hard for a victim to reach out and ask for help, especially human trafficking victims. Sometimes they don't even know they're a victim of human trafficking, because those traffickers are so good at the business and making it seem like it's their fault and they made this choice to, it's scary. And I can't tell you how many times I've had victims say, nobody's going to believe me. They're not going to believe
Mhm.
that this happened to me. And some of the stories are completely unbelievable, that somebody could do that kind of evil. There are unbelievable stories, but we believe, and we've experienced a lot of different victimizations. And we're here to say that there are people to help. There shouldn't be shame or guilt. And there should always be an opportunity for people to get help and hope, to restore their lives.
You still have a few events left for the, awareness month. Do you want to kind of go through those events
Yeah, I
again?
think we have one major event to talk about. You can go to calltofreedom.org and sign up for this event. It's by reservation and sign up only. It'll be on Tuesday, February 4th. We are showing a special viewing of the movie called Trapped. Doors open at 6 p.m. Event starts at 6:30. This is free to the community, but you do need to sign up at calltofreedom.org. We have a few seats left, and we would love to have you present and there just to really learn about this issue. It's a tough movie to watch, but it is definitely going to be worth your time to have a better awareness of what's happening and how this is facilitated. The producer, EJ Cohen, is coming to Sioux Falls and actually will be at the event. He
Oh,
will do
wow.
a question and answer following the movie, viewing of the movie. And then we'll also have an opportunity to get interviews with people who saw the movie and get their thoughts on how it impacted them personally. And we want to use those particular interviews nationally to be able to promote the movie Trapped, get it into more communities, get the word out. Ejaz is phenomenal. He lives in New York. He started out as in the clothing line and went into photography. Was doing a photography job in North Dakota. Met a young girl in a gas station
Oh,
in
wow.
North Dakota that forever changed his life, and just found out through that encounter about human trafficking. And he just started asking questions. He went home just kind of like I did. And I said, either I can just bury my face in the sand and say this doesn't happen, or I can be part of the solution. And he decided to be part of the solution. And so he took his own funding and went out and filmed this movie called Trapped. It's about two young girls who've been through commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and sexual abuse, which is always pretty much intertwined. There's a lot of intersections between other victimizations with human trafficking. And it just follows a storyline of a mom and a daughter and another family with a young girl that are in a rural community. And this perpetrator identifies the mom being vulnerable to with the intent to get to her daughter. And so we follow that storyline. You'll forever be changed. And that's why we're showing the movie, because we see it happen like that in South Dakota. It's very familiar to what we see through those that walk through the doors of Call to Freedom. And Hollywood can sometimes do us a really great favor, and other times it can paint pictures that aren't reality. And we really feel like the movie Trapped gives you a true perspective of how it's happening within rural communities, but also in the Dakotas as well. And so, again, that's Tuesday, February 4th. Please sign up at calltofreedom.org, reserve your seats. The doors, it'll be a downtown State Theater. Doors open at 6 o'clock. And then the event starts at 6:30. There'll be a Q&A with Ejaz and myself after the movie to ask any questions, and then we'll follow up with some interviews. So we welcome you. And if you have any questions, again, reach out to calltofreedom.org.
And that'll be an easy day for me to remember because that's actually my birthday. But
Well, happy birthday. You're going to be
um,
all of like 20, right? 21?
exactly. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, you said that Hollywood sometimes can do you a favor and sometime, or, just shed light. But I think, yeah, in some of these movies or even TV shows and stuff, we get this idea that, yeah, it's like someone that's going to jump out in the bushes and get us, but it's not always that. It happens slowly and it takes time, and
We've
it's
had where
scary.
traffickers will take up to 6 months to a year to groom their victim, to get them to leave those circumstances and come to them. And what happens is it's easier to keep a victim who's come to you because they've made that decision, versus if you kidnap somebody, it's harder to keep them hidden. It's harder to keep them from identifying as a victim. And so it's just really interesting that traffickers will take the time to do this, because they can make a lot of money off of one person. They can
Mm.
sell a human being over and over again. They can force labor somebody over and over again for literally nothing, to facilitate either sex or labor trafficking. And we have to realize that not everybody who approaches is our friend, and really understand. We do a curriculum called Speak Up, and we started to do prevention work in the last couple of years of Call to Freedom, just because the once an individual is pulled into human trafficking, it's really hard to get them the help that they need. And it's also really hard, and it costs a lot of resources to pull them out of that situation and get them healed and back on track. And so we started a prevention curriculum called Speak Up. And essentially that goes to kindergarten to 12th grade. And we go into schools, we go into wherever we're welcome, youth groups that have young kids. And the curriculum is specified for that age group. So typically kindergarten, when we start, we talk about safe and unsafe people. When we get to some of that second and first and second grade, we talk about consent. What does yes mean? What does no mean? We establish who are your trusted people in your circle that you can go to if you don't feel right and somebody's asking you to do something that you don't want to do. And when you say no, what does no mean? Also, what is a healthy relationship? If you have
Mhm.
somebody who's healthy in your life, are they going to ask you to send a picture of yourself naked? Probably not. If they're unhealthy, they're probably going to fall into that category. So, what we want to do is really equip kids at a younger age to be able to identify the tactics of these perpetrators. And they have the skill set to be able to identify that for themselves and also make the decisions and have that trusted circle they can go to instead of keeping that silent and not being able to have a voice in that process. And prevention, I think, along with education, is really key to making sure perpetrators don't get to our kids or vulnerable individuals before we do.
And it is interesting, the trusted people in your life, because sometimes the person you should be able to trust, like a
Mhm.
family member or even your parents or the neighbors or something, sometimes they're the ones that you shouldn't trust. So you kind of, yeah, you need to really, and as a kid, that can be hard to decipher, like this person acts like they're my friend, So
Well,
yeah,
and
that's
these guys,
tricky.
these perpetrators are really good at getting to know their individuals. And so let's say a young child goes through a divorce and they've never been through a divorce before. Their parents may have been together pretty much all of their life. That perpetrator identifies that's a vulnerability. He'll begin to draw them out, talk about it, get them to open up to them, self disclose to them things that are happening, and that they're probably the only person who loves them now. Both of your parents are going to leave you. It's so amazing how they manipulate situations to their benefit, and I think that is why it's so important to get educated on this issue. I've sat with survivors who have been in just different treatment centers, and they're actually testifying on a federal case, and she still didn't know she was a trafficking victim because she thought that her trafficker cared about her, that he loved her. And I had to sit and process with her for hours, getting her to identify what exactly happened to her and having conversations about, you realize that that person knew that person when they introduced you to your boyfriend. And
Hmm.
as she began to unravel this weave of these people that were all grouped together, connected in this situation, as she finally looked at me in the middle of the process, she goes, they set me up. And that was an aha moment for her because she truly felt like these people were friends. She was testifying in a federal case and still didn't really fully understand what had happened to her. And
Hmm.
so this is how good perpetrators are. Again, that's why I say get us out to do a training. Let us, speak in. If you feel like anybody in your circle of loved ones is being isolated or trying to be controlled, reach out to us to help navigate those situations. I mean, sometimes it's hard to get individuals out of that situation when they don't identify themselves and they're not willing to walk away, and that's how good these perpetrators are. But yet for a family member to be able to process that and to be able to not go into what the trafficker is telling them that you're going to do to draw them closer to themselves is really key. So Call to Freedom is here to support you throughout that process. Again, you can go to calltofreedom.org and send us an email, or you can call 605-759-3565 if you have any questions or can relate to any of the conversation we're talking about today. What does it look like here in South Dakota? There's multiple ways that it happens in South Dakota. Familial trafficking is one of the most common forms of trafficking, and that is a parent or a guardian who traffics their own child. That's the hardest one to wrap your mind around. It's one of the most common we see walk through the doors of Call to Freedom. Most of those kids that are in familial trafficking cases don't self identify because the person they trust the most, their mom, their dad, their aunt, their uncle, grandmother, grandfather, introduced them to the lifestyle of sexual abuse, commercial sexual exploitation, or human trafficking. And so we really encourage first responders to get trained for the red flags to identify young kids that are in familial cases. And that's because of rural communities, and as well is because of Here comes my family. So maybe as rural communities. So getting that first responder training is really key as well. And then obviously we talked about the events, and it can typically happen in that way. Also, I would encourage people to get a social media training and how this is facilitated on social media, from either commercial sexual exploitation to sextortion to human trafficking, and how that connection happens within social media. And then also the one is the gang and coordinated group trafficking. And so that does happen in different ways. So I would just say look for one of our informational luncheons at calldofreedom.org, and we can get you signed up and you can learn all about those different ways it's facilitated in South Dakota.
And we're right on time for the fam getting home. So
Yeah. Thanks for
Yep.
covering this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for making the time.
Have a great one. Thanks, Natasha.
Okay. I hope you found that conversation informative, enlightening, inspiring. And as we said in the conversation, if you need help, if you want to volunteer, if you want to learn more, check out calldofreedom.org. They do such meaningful work that I'm glad I could have this conversation and learn more. And I think that's going to do it for this episode of Talking with Tasha. Thank you so much for listening. You can find all things Talking with Tasha at talkingwithtasha.com. You can send me an email at talkingwithtashapod@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok for who knows how long, Threads, YouTube. I'm also on YouTube. Check that out. I'm also on Cameo if you want to send somebody a personalized video. And I'm also on Fiverr if you need any voiceover work done for an ad or animation or whatever. That'd be fun. You can listen to Talking with Tasha on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, and at talkingwithtasha.com. Everything's linked at talkingwithtasha.com. Rate, review, subscribe, comment, like, share, do all the things. And I will talk to you next time. But until then, be safe, make good choices, wash your hands, just try to be a good person, stay hydrated, and peace out. Brussels sprout.